In this video, we're looking at the subject of repairing photos. This photograph is an original 1904 photograph that was scanned at a very high resolution. I was asked several years ago if I could repair this photograph. Well, as you can see, it really would look like you have your work cut out for you. However, after 6 hours of working on this project, I was able to turn that photograph into something that looked like this. This is a low resolution scan of the final output, as I don't have the original any longer. Now, this is something you would be happy to place on your mantelpiece. Now, the good news is all of the tools that I used to correct this original photograph are the same tools that I'm about to teach you in this next repair. So why don't we jump in and see what we have to do. We're going to use this classic home photograph to learn how to repair photos. As you can see on the right hand side, it's been overexposed, possibly the camera was open. We've got a big tear, some scratches, dust, all sorts of things on this photograph. So where do we begin? The first rule of thumb is, what can I crop out of this image so I don't have to repair it? Well, so I'll grab my crop tool, and quite frankly we can actually remove quite a lot of this image. So of course this red area is a problem, so the more of that we can remove the better. I want to keep the little boy's arm, try and keep him center of the photograph, and I'll pull that down a little, and as you can see we've got a little scratch across the top there. We've got the tear, that looks good. I think we can work with that and do something. The first tool we're going to look at is the dust and scratch removal tool. So I'm going to zoom in on both of our subject's faces, up to image, correction, and dust and scratch. I'm going to turn off preview so you can see how this works. Radius effectively is the number of pixels that you believe represents the majority of white spots. Of course, all those white spots are the dust. So how many pixels in size do you believe they are? The higher the resolution your image, the higher the resolution you'll require here. For me, 1 to 2 is generally what I do personally work with. The threshold really turns up the effect. The threshold, if you want to think about it, the higher the threshold means I'm willing to put up with more dust spots. The lower the threshold, I don't want so many. So, if I go to a maximum, click preview, notice all the dust spots disappear, but also notice a slight blurring or defocus of the face. So if I turn preview off, you can see them all come back. What we need to do is find the best compromise between getting rid of as many dust spots as possible and blurring the image. So I'm going to come back to, say here, turn preview on. Gee, I didn't notice a lot of blurring there, so I'll come down a little bit lower, click preview. A lot of spots are disappearing, as you can see, and not a lot of defocusing. Down a little bit more, and I think that's a fairly good end result. So I'll click OK to that. So that's a good quality starting point. The next tool we're going to look at is part of our tools, part of our touch-up tools flyout. The last tool is called the touch-up brush. The touch-up brush actually works in a very similar fashion. In fact, I'll pop that away again. It actually blurs all of the pixels inside of the nib size. So as I click on a white spot, you'll notice, if you can see my brush there, I'll click on the hair so that's rather obvious. As you can see, I click on those white spots, they're disappearing, and that's because everything inside of that nib, all of the colors in those pixels are being blurred together, and of course that covers up the white of the spot with the surrounding color. Always be careful when you're doing a dark line that you don't blur the lighter parts with the darker parts. So basically, I'll go around my whole image now, and I'll spend a lot of time just clicking on these white spots. So I'll go ahead and do some of that now. One thing you'll find important, as you can see I've removed most of those spots, is the strength. The higher resolution your scan, the higher the strength you'll probably have to use. Medium is always a good starting value, so I recommend that you always start there. I'll just zoom back out a little bit more now. And I'll start to just do these few spots down here, just on the last few spots down the bottom here, and I'm almost done. So it really does pay to spend the time on the individual spots, as you can see me doing here. Now the next tool we're going to look at is the clone tool. And we use the clone tool really to effect the same type of repair as we're doing with the touch-up brush. The advantage with the clone tool is that it doesn't blur pixels together, but rather samples information from one location to put onto another location. So I'm going to zoom in up the top here so we can look at this hair and the tear that we've got here. The clone tool is the second one in the list there, clone tool. It's important to note the options on the property bar, of which the most important for us right now are transparency and feather. Feather is sort of like a blurring in, and transparency is obviously how much we can see through. Finger on the shift key, click and drag, and I can resize the nib of my clone tool. Now when I right click, I create what we call an anchor point. So effectively everything inside of that anchored nib is what I'm going to clone to an alternate location. So if I click over here, what I've done is I've taken colour from that spot, and as I move, the anchor moves with me. To fix the anchor to one location, right click on the to anchor, and then Alt plus Shift will anchor to one location. And we simply click over the top of everything we want to cover. You can see the colour's not quite right there. I might just quickly undo that. And then I'll come over to the other side here, right click, and I'll use a bit of that. But this time I'll increase the transparency, Alt Shift, and you can see we just need to blend it up just a little. There we go. So as you can see, we are now a right click over here, repairing the wall. The same process applies here. I'll quickly show you how to start on an edge. Control Z, I accidentally clicked then. Finger on the shift key. Okay, lower the transparency back down to around the 30 mark. Right click on half, and then just go across in a straight line. Now, what you want to start to do is always work down the side, so right click, anchor to the side, and notice how your anchor point moves with you. Anchor on the other side, and then do the same thing so that you're getting both sets of colour. And you can see how easy it is to start repairing. Now, right click up there, then I'll right click half, and I'll slowly start to work my way down. The biggest thing to be careful of is shadows. So I'm going to go ahead now and do some more, and then I'll show you how to work with a shadow. The first major obstacle in this repair is this crease in the sofa there. So I'm going to hold my finger on the mouse and shift key at the same time. Select the shadowy area above, right click, and make sure I move at the same angle as the shadow. I'll click on the highlight this time, do the same thing, and then right click underneath and go up the other way. And you can see how we can get through a shadow fairly well. Sometimes it pays to increase the transparency. Start at the top and just introduce a little bit of that other side, and look at that, we've effected a repair. Lower the transparency down again, and now we start working alongside our repair on both sides and continue on repairing. Well, I've effected all of my repairs, and as you can see, you really cannot tell there was ever a tear up through that sofa in the background. Well, we're going to use the clone tool now just to correct a few areas on the face. Always be careful when cloning a face, because a face has so many tonal changes on the face. You need to be careful, so make sure you're constantly re-anchoring right alongside that particular piece of colour, otherwise you can really get it messed up. And so I've got a reasonably, well, a 50% transparency there, and that's how I'd get rid of that. Finally, for me, I would always right click in a general area, really increase the level of transparency, and just two clicks to just help fade in and out that area. Up the top here we've got some blur on the photo. Now lower the transparency a little, just click through there, make sure again that you're working with the same and correct skin tones. That looks great. One last area we'd like to look at here is, we'll just zoom in over here. For right now, just get rid of that big dirty mark there, which is actually, it was a piece of dirt on the scanner, which I deliberately left there just to demonstrate this. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and touch up the nose and a few other places, and that's basically how we'll use the clone tool in this scenario here, as you can see. The last phase of our edit and repair is really one of making a decision. The red area we can see here is exactly that. It's only red. There are no other colours to work with. So what could we do? Well, first of all, we could consider cropping away more of the image, and that would help. Or alternately, I would consider going up to Adjust, down to Desaturate, and have a quick look at what does it look like in black and white. Actually, that does look a lot better. You can notice here, though, where the red was, a distinct lack of contrast. So is there anything we could do about that? Well, Control Z, undo this. If we use the new black and white lens, we might be able to resolve this. Up to Object, Create, New Lens, and Black and White. Click Reset. Okay, the advantage, of course, with this filter is that I can adjust individual colours. So if I adjust the red, hopefully it will just affect that area there. So let's darken the red area, and it's doing exactly what we want, creating just that little bit more contrast as I slowly darken. I think that's about enough. If I were going to spend the time, I would mask the hand and the face separately, and I would adjust their contrast and brightness values. But for now, I think that looks fine. Why don't we add a tint? Because I really do like that sepia type look. Something like that. And click OK. What we've done by using this filter is create a lens, and that lens is actually sitting above the background. So we need to combine it now with the background for our final output. Right click, combine objects with background, and I think we'll go up to the tone curve, just create a little more contrast. Notice the histogram lets us know that there's not very many highlights and there's not very many shadows. So we're going to create what I would call a classic S shape curve. And that's stretching the histogram, as you can see. Add another node here and just a few more shadows. Darken up a little bit more for the shadows. Fraction more highlight. Now, because we're dealing with sepia, a sepia looking type photograph, you tend to get away with things. But I think that looks really good. You know what? If we come up to Effects, Creative, and come down to Vignette, a lot of people say that differently. I hope you like my expression. Black or white and various shapes are available, but I'm going to go with ellipse, or if you like, oval, the color black, and we can adjust the size of our ellipse, something like that. Of course, as I bring it in, it's removing the red area, which is helping us to hide the problem. And the fade, we can adjust that. Click OK. And I think that's a fantastic outcome considering where we began with that terribly damaged photograph.